Let's think about opposites for a second. Red, blue. Slow, fast. Do, don't. How about Nintendo? Chances are the first company you thought of was the video game company called Sega, who looked at the console gaming market while it was in its early stages and decided to fight the market champion, Nintendo. With punchy advertising, powerful computing, and a special fast blue hedgehog, Sega was able to solidify their place as a gaming giant and would shape early gaming culture as a whole. And they did this with their entry to the home console world, Genesis. Welcome to the 8th episode of Retro Tech, the show where we dive into technological innovations of the past and analyze their legacies. I'm your host Vex0r, and today we will be looking at the legacy of Sega's hugely successful Genesis home gaming console. In their past, Sega was originally a manufacturer for coin-operated arcade games, and while they were successful, the industry began to experience a decline in the early 1980s. A new trend that would take over the gaming industry was brewing: home console gaming. The company made the jump to the home gaming industry with their first entry on July 15, 1983, the SG-1000. But one of gaming's giants, Nintendo, had a similar plan. On the exact same day, Nintendo also released a home console, the Famicom, or as known as outside of Japan, NES. Nintendo's console completely overshadowed Sega. It's now a revered gaming legend, while the SG-1000 is hardly memorable. Sega needed to innovate if they wanted to grab a foothold in the console industry. To do this, they reached into their history of arcade gaming and shrunk down the technology from their arcade machines into one that consumers could own in their living room. They created a 16-bit home console that also had 2 additional processors, making a beast of a console that they called the Sega Mega Drive. Its capabilities completely beat what current console competitors had to offer, including Nintendo's NES. But with their pre-existing solid standing, it would be a long time before Nintendo would loosen their market dominance. Fortunately for Sega, home gamers began craving more powerful games, more than what the NES could offer. The Mega Drive was able to fulfill this desire for expanded gaming capabilities, and when it was released in the United States, Sega needed to make it known that their console would bring in a new era for the brand. And on August 14, 1989, the Mega Drive was released as the Sega Genesis. In its early days of release, the Sega Genesis still fared poorly compared to Nintendo. It launched with a game that is essentially forgotten, Altered Beasts, and sold 500,000 units in the US, landing very short of their 1 million unit goal. In Japan, they couldn't even shake Nintendo's grip off the market, possibly because Nintendo pretty much birthed the console industry there. Undeterred, Sega set their sights on the US market. They had to redesign their marketing strategy. Everyone knew about Nintendo, so what would make consumers care about another company trying to do what Nintendo already did? Sega picked up on this. They knew that they couldn't beat Nintendo if they ran the same race, so they began to advertise themselves differently in the US, and with a new slogan, they placed themselves at complete odds with Nintendo.
16-bit arcade graphics.
You can't do this on Nintendo.
Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Nintendo didn't have the speed that Genesis did. Nintendo didn't have the mature titles that Genesis carried. Sega's console did. The Genesis wanted to boast itself as the more mature console, the one that gamers would graduate to once they grew up from Nintendo's NES. And to present this philosophy, Sega needed a mascot, one that could instill the sense of speed that the Genesis was capable of. Enter the famous blue speedster, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic represented everything that Nintendo didn't: speed, flashiness, and lightning-paced action. The character was immediately a hit. This type of fast gameplay was revolutionary and something that the gaming world had been sorely craving. Not only did Sonic exude more power and speed than Mario, but he also brought a new type of attitude into the gaming arena. You see, while Mario gave off a generally pleasant, wholesome vibe and played slowly, Sonic had attitude and embodied restlessness much like a rebellious teenager. Players could see him cross his arms and tap his foot whenever they idled, enticing the players to keep moving and keep speeding across the level. Sonic was everything that a 90s punk teenager raised on MTV could project themselves on. He was cool. His first game was released on June 23, 1991. But despite the success of Sonic, they needed a way to fend off Nintendo's upcoming fighter, the Super NES. Sega's move to uproot the competition was a huge financial risk. They planned to bundle Sonic and the Genesis console together, as well as reduce the price of the console itself. The company executives were nervous. Not only was this their Hail Mary to knock Nintendo off of their throne, but bundling their best-selling title with their console at a lower price surely meant financial self-destruction. This move had to pay off. And it did. Hugely. Sega sold 15 million units of their Sonic Genesis bundle, giving Nintendo's Red Plumber a run for his money. Once again, there was worthy competition in the home console industry, causing innovation to reinvigorate. With Sega's Genesis shaking things up in the gaming world, the industry finally had reason to move forward with its technology. Before the success of the Genesis, Nintendo had been growing complacent with their current hardware. 8-bit systems like their NES were raking in money, so why would they need to change? It wasn't until Sega snatched 55% of the 16-bit marketplace that Nintendo realized that people wanted more. The Genesis was perfect proof of an industry that had run stale because of the lack of worthy competition, and since then, Nintendo had learned that innovation was necessary if they wanted to keep their grip on the market. Genesis also brought a breath of fresh air in the gaming market, and offered gamers a more mature haven away from the childish, cartoony world that Nintendo had created. With realistic American sports simulations and bloody, violent games, Sega took its place as the company for more mature and more cool gamers, showing Nintendo that their audience had grown up. Unfortunately, Sega's career in the console industry wouldn't last long. Bad business decisions, including the rushed decision to pull out of America's 16-bit market after the success of the 32-bit Sega Saturn in Japan, left Sega of America running dry in revenue. In the US, the Saturn did not fare as well as it did in Japan, and Sega of America suffered because of its instant transition away from the Genesis. Sega continued to bury themselves with overly ambitious plans to conquer the video game industry that ultimately set themselves out of the competition. After Sega enjoyed their time in the limelight, they no longer had a future in the console world. Today, Sega no longer manufactures video game consoles, and Sonic's recent games leave much to be longed for. But the success of Genesis is nothing to scoff at. Despite weak numbers in their early days, Sega was able to pull off one of the greatest marketing campaigns in video game history and brought themselves to equal standing with the industry's king. The engineering and capabilities of the Genesis symbolized a new era for Sega and the video game industry, and the company's new mascot Sonic the Hedgehog launched the console and the brand into the limelight. Sega is still one of the world's leading video game developers, and their success is built off of the back of the console that put them in the history books, the Sega Genesis. Thanks for joining me in looking back on the legacy of Sega's legendary console. The 90s, 80s, 70s, and beyond are full of wonders just like the ones we explored today, and my channel is your starting point to discover more from these eras. So subscribe for more about artifacts of the past, classic mysteries, and stories from the retro age. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, and most importantly, have a phenomenal rest of your day.